because we're going to talk about magic eggs, or what's written on that magic egg, which is Enochian. So there's one last person you need to know about for the Golden Dawn, and he is the person that is responsible for what is called the Enochian alphabet, and that's John Dee. So we're talking about a very old astrologer from the 1500s named John Dee, who was possibly magic's greatest cuck. I'll just call him that. So we're going to go to the 1500s. And while English, John Dee spent much of his youth studying abroad in Belgium and France. One, because apparently the English hated teaching math. They just had a problem with it. In England, you didn't learn math. And two, his family had lost their status when Henry VIII died in 1547. So while he's away, besides getting to learn math, he learned civil law, astronomy, and probably most pertinent to us, astrology. So while studying abroad, he was also first accused of sorcery when he made a giant winged scarab that carried an actor through a play for a play production. And everyone was like, witch, witch, witch. But no, he was just science. So in the 1550s, he returned to England, where his personal library expanded to probably become the greatest in England, with maybe 2,500 books and 1,800 manuscripts. So to buy all these books and to make ends meet, Dee taught and consulted with exploration companies, and he also drew up a number of horoscopes. He crafted one for the reigning Queen Mary and was accused of both consorting with Elizabeth to overthrow her and that he was attempting to kill her with sorcery. So he was charged with treason, but fortunately for him, Mary died, either from the flu or from cancer. So in 1558, Queen Elizabeth I was crowned. And to counter out the prophecies that Nostradamus had made, which foretold there'd be bad luck if she were queen, Dee drew up a horoscope for the day of her coronation, which predicted much nicer things. And Dee's advice would become relied upon by the queen, and she would consult him for everything from her teeth hurting to when she wanted research to validate her claims to the lands in North America. John Dee is credited with coming up the term the British Empire and heavily advocated for English colonies. So he became a personal favorite of the queen's, and she also protected him from further accusations of sorcery. So he was married in 1565, only to have the first wife die childless a decade later. 2 years after that, he wed the 22-year-old Jane Fromenades. Dee was 51 at this time, but he ended up having 8 children with her, and they were conceived according to astrological charts drawn up by Dee that were based on Jane's menstrual cycle, which he diligently recorded. He was like an early period app, he just like had the amount of her menses, like how often she was having it, and then he would bang her on the days so they could conceive the best possible children.
I mean, if that's what they agreed to as a couple, I mean, that's kind of early for such thought, I guess. Family planning.
Early family planning, and not just thinking her belly was full of sea snakes. Although I think that was probably also part of it. Like, so on this day, the sea snake comes forth from her womb and therefore conceive the best child. So by the 1580s, besides setting up spy networks across England, we're skipping a giant chunk of history here because he was a spy and there's a whole bunch of, go look at that shit. We're here to talk about magic. So Dee was really getting into crystallomancy, which is a fancy way of talking about looking into a crystal ball. However, no matter how much he tried it, it just didn't work for him. So clearly what he needed was somebody with that talent. Not that possibly staring into a crystal ball may not work, just that he wasn't good at it. So first he met a guy named Barnabas Saul, and after a couple of months, it became clear that Saul was a fraud. Not just, I would say his name was Barnabas Saul. How that man is clearly a con man. Don't have him for your pharmacist, like he's going to be selling you snake oil. Barnabas Saul cannot be trusted. So, but one of the people who helped clue Dee in on how bad Saul was another man who maybe could not be trusted. And he had just recently started going by the name Edward Kelley. He was born Edward Talbot in Ireland in 1555, and he was much younger than Dee. He started out as a lawyer, but was arrested for forgery, and he may have had both of his ears cut off for that. I saw it.
Why does that have to do?
Because he was a thief and a criminal. So in order for other people to know that he was a criminal, they cut off his ears.
Huh.
I'm not sure. I saw that in some places.
I've never heard that. Interesting.
Yep. So Edward moves in with Dee as his new scryer. And Dee decided that light rays could be focused using crystal balls or mirrors to control singular angels, and that these rays could be used to prevent the intrusion of evil spirits. So he's got Kelley here to start being the one who's scrying with these rays.
And he needed some Madame Trelawney up in his life.
Right. So he started, Kelley was using black obsidian mirrors and crystal balls to scry, while Dee would record what Kelley was seeing. And Dee recorded hundreds of spirit conversations Kelley had with angels who communicated an angelic language called Enochian, which was comprised of non-English letters with its own grammar and syntax. The Enochian script is written right to left and may use accent marks. Dee himself never called it Enochian, instead referring to it as angelical, the celestial speech, the first language of God, Christ, and particularly Adamical, or Adamical, Adam, I-C-A-L. And because he asserted that it was first used by Adam in the Garden of Eden to name all of God's creatures. But it's called Enochian because Dee also claimed that Enoch of the Book of Enoch fame was the last human to know the language.
Okay.
So while the Enochian letters have English letter equivalents, their names are often pronounced differently from the corresponding English letters, though some are pronounced as they would be in English. The 48 poetic verses known as the angelical or Enochian keys are used in the practice of Enochian magic, and each has distinct functions within the overall magical system. So the letters themselves are magical, right? So, which is why you can do, like in Supernatural, the sigils that are written in the Enochian magic, those themselves bring forth magic, right? So
lay a hand on it, it does something.
Yeah, usually if you cut yourself with something, that's going to give you lockjaw. So anyhow, so the angels carried many messages, including predicting the beheading of Mary, Queen of Scots, and the fight with the Spanish Armada. Kelley also received a message from the angels during one of the early sessions that he should get married. So though he claimed to hate marriage, he soon married a 19-year-old named Joan Cooper. Kelley, though, was really more into alchemy and not the scrying stuff that he was doing, and not the spiritual metaphor version of alchemy that we sometimes talk about where he's trying to become a higher being. He really wants to make gold out of shit. So after a few years, he kind of refuses to do any more scrying for Dee, and Dee's like, well, let me try my 8-year-old son. But he's like, you don't have any talent for this either. Why can't you see anything in this crystal ball? Kelley, get back to work. So Edward Kelley gets back to scrying, and this time the angels send him a message that is so scandalous that he didn't want to tell John Dee. He's like, no, I can't read it. I can't tell you. It's so bad. And so what he said was,
some tea.
Kelley told him that Dee needed to hold all things in common between them, and that included their wives. The angels wanted them to swap wives in bed. Now, Dee said, well, if that's what the angels want, and then he somehow convinced his wife to do this, and then he somehow convinced Edward Kelley's wife, remember, who was also around her early 20s, and Dee's like in his 70s by now. Like, it's just gross.
That's what I was gonna say. I'm like, he's like, eh.
Okay, so the women are getting the bad end of this deal, and this was also
I don't know. Maybe it's good. Who knows?
But this was the end of the angelic conversations. No more angelic. So somehow after this, Dee didn't want to hear from any more angels. So I have condensed their lives into this very small nutshell. So in this world, Dee goes back to Elizabeth's court while Kelley kept working on trying to make gold for the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph, who threw him in prison when he failed. Kelley was briefly released, but his freedom didn't last, and he died in prison in 1595. His death is attributed either to suicide or to getting stabbed while attempting an escape. Dee actually dies quietly at his home in 1608, and you can see his scrying mirror in the British Museum. They have that there. You can go see the things that he was looking in that helped shape our modern world. Our modern world was shaped by a dude who let another dude look into a crystal ball and tell him what was going on, and that's what helped shape the British Empire. So that's just a little bit more into the Enochian language that we have so much, which was what is on our magic eggs. And also into John Dee, who the Golden Dawn, when we get to them, I use a lot of his magic and the Enochian magic.